Forgot to run the thing. We're live. Hello and welcome. I'm the Restless Guy.
I'm Harry from Fog of War.
And I'm still Johnny B, but together we are
Modelling for Advantage. Or Muddling for Adventure or something.
Just a disclaimer before we start, viewers, my old Chinese spy phone is on the go and it may cut out at any point. Not that I'm going to contribute anything to this stream, but just in case, that's where I've got.
Johnny, we love your smiling face.
All right. Catch up with the early adopters in the comments. We've got Axe, and Axe is going to catch in the rerun as always. Glenn Dewar says, good evening all. Ham and Jam. Bob Edwards is good morning from New Zealand.
Hey, Bob.
Practically a next door neighbor to you, give or take 1,000 miles, right, Harry?
Yeah, something like that.
Thomas Hurd and Rosie. Anybody else is here to say hi?
Hey, Rosie.
What's going to happen tonight is once you've got bored of looking at our giant heads in this format, Harry is he's prepared some slides. We're going to talk through what Battlefront have said about their forthcoming releases. It's a big year, it looks like, for Battlefront. Some big new developments. We don't just mean like an extra couple of tanks for a particular period, a whole slew of new stuff in hard plastic, which certainly I'm genuinely quite excited about.
And possibly even a whole new game.
Indeed, and a whole new game. And what I'm glad of is after Peter's Christmas message, I'm finally in a position to talk about some of the things that he showed us and talked to us about last summer. Because although he said a lot on camera, he said a lot more, and I've been really struggling to keep it all to myself. But I think,
Kaiser, he shows you stuff he doesn't show the rest of us, man.
Well, he probably does if you get to sit next to him for half an hour, because he did enjoy talking about it. And he's very excited about this stuff himself. It's great. And it's good to see how the passion in, the company owners and directors. And I think his title is chairman of the board, actually. But, he's very, very passionate about it. So
I think his actual job title is No, Pete, don't tell them that.
Well, that's the great thing about owning a lot of the company, but not actually running it, I guess, isn't it? Right. Shall I try and put your slides up then? Oh, you know what we haven't done?
What's that?
That was the way to do that. Is we haven't talked about any hobbying we're doing tonight, which we usually do. So I'm going to try and put a bit more contrast paint on some of these 54mm Africa core.
Well done.
In contrast, I of course mean speed pants from Army Painter.
Yeah.
John.
Oh.
John.
Oh, me? Has Harry not got anything on the table?
Oh, I have, but I'll let you go first.
Well, assuming I don't cut out, I'm going to be working on these little Rubicon trucks.
Ooh.
I really want to get a bit more bolt. Well, we haven't played bolt action in ages, have we, Kaiser? So I really want to get to a point. Not that I need them, but I'd like to. So I'm going to be doing that whilst I listen to you guys.
1,500 weight trucks?
15 carat weight, I believe.
Oh, carat weight. Okay.
John doesn't recognize the term 100 weight because he's young and ginger.
Right. Okay. I earlier was working on some aliens from the Gale Force 9 game. Another glorious day in the Corps, because
it's a good game,
It's a great game. I love it, but I'm still building those. And
how are you getting on with the tails?
Yeah, I was just about to say. So with the aliens, they were obviously designed by someone who knows nothing about using miniatures in a game, because the tails just stick on, and it's like, okay. You really need like a post that you can fit in, but I guess they were really worried that it would look like some sort of weird alien butt plug.
Possibly, but it is still a bit.
Yeah, that's right. You don't want to be doing that to your aliens. That's how rumors start, Kaiser.
Well, these are modern times, Harry. Let people do what they want to do. Don't judge. All right.
No, I don't want to species shame, but
All right. Okay. Harry, just in case anybody around here doesn't know who you are, do you want to just give yourself a brief introduction, tell them where they can find you online?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Harry from Fog of War, and I talk about Battlefront products like Flames of War, Team Yankee, all the other stuff that they're releasing. As you can see behind me, there's a whole bunch of stuff. My channel is a mix of history and product reviews. because that's what I'm good at. And you can find me on the Tube of You and OnlyFans.
And OnlyFans, that does not come advised. We have lost John. Hopefully
Oh,
he will
no.
rejoin us.
Yeah.
So we've had some other people come join us. Michael Wayne is here. G'day, folks, taking on that Antipodean accent. I can hear it. Bob Edwards, Ernst Udo, Peter, Liz
Noggins of War.
I remember Flames of War started a demo at a convention in Hawke's Bay in early 2000s.
Wow.
Will GM for food. You do side hustle with a bit of D&D as well, don't you, Harry?
I do. I like a bit of D&D. That's me, 3 kobolds in a T-shirt.
Yeah, fingering a D20 of an evening.
Yeah.
New Battlefront's going to hit your net wealth. Certainly is. Oh, Duncan FX as well. Right, as I said, Harry has produced some beautiful slides.
Because that's kind of what I'm about.
Which will hopefully structure our otherwise wild, waffling.
And chaotic. Yep, there is that. But there's a lot of interesting stuff on here.
There's a lot.
So we've got Team Yankee, we've got the Pacific is coming. We might even talk about early war. And because we're on your show, we're also going to talk about World of Tanks, which is something that you're a big fan of.
I like a beer and pretzels game.
Yeah,
I do like it.
I have said before, but you guys do great World of Tanks stuff.
Right, thank you.
I always enjoy coming and watching you beating up Johnny B or Willie Mike or whatever.
Right,
it's always very pretty. So let's get started then, if we're going to talk about World of Tanks.
Right.
All this stuff is coming.
Some of it's already come.
Some of it has already come. So the new starter set, the 2023 starter set, had all sorts of interesting stuff in it. So that comes, Mouse,
Ray, T29, the American, is it T29? The American tank?
Yeah.
And not Chieftain, the one before Chieftain.
Centurion.
Centurion, there you go.
Centurion Mark 1, the weird looking one.
Which has got like a Polston gun in the side.
Yeah, it's got a 20mm coaxial machine gun that's independently traversable.
Yeah.
It's very... Yeah, they got rid of that.
Subsequent versions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's like, no, the war's over, man. We can take a minute and chill, and nobody needs that.
Right. So this is one of the things that they'd said quite a few years ago. One of the things I remember Peter Siminovich, when he does his Christmas message, his State of the Union address, had said that this relationship that they have with World of Tanks, which is sort of good for them marketing their product, is going to enable them to make so many vehicles that they would just never be able to make otherwise. So I think they just didn't feel that they could sell them in sufficient quantity to justify. I mean, they need to sell, many thousands of sprues to break even on it.
Plastic injection molding is hideously expensive. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands
once you get over that hump, it's all money.
To do the 3D CAD stuff and then to mill that into an injection mold is big bucks. So they need to know that they can
because
churn enough of them.
Is a World War II themed game. It's actually mostly played with a load of paper panzers and nonsense and 1950s Soviet vehicles and so forth.
Yeah.
Because of the way you scale through the game, right?
Yeah.
You might start driving around in a Panzer II or something, but you quickly move past World War II and past history. So in that game, there's a lot more scope for these things. And certainly if you want to have a Nazi German tank tree that's going to compete with IS-3 and successors to IS-3, then that's why you need all of this nonsense on the top row. So tell us what they are, Harry. Do you know what they are?
Well, the E100. So that was they were working on a heavy, tank series, the Germans at different levels. So you would get the E100s, the 100-ton level. There was an E50 for a 50-ton tank, like Panther or Tiger. and there was an E25. You know, so
How is that one different to Mouse? It looks very similar.
it is very similar, but hopefully it would have worked.
Right. Okay.
Unlike Mouse.
Right.
Which
Mouse sort of worked. Yeah, they could move it a little bit.
it was ordered into combat, drove a little while, broke down, and they blew it up.
Yeah.
So if that's what you want from your armored fighting vehicles, then it was an absolute roaring success.
Yeah, but I think any 100-ton vehicle in 1945 was going to do the same thing.
Yeah,
I don't
absolutely.
think building a new one was going to change anything. So the Rheinmetall Scorpion, that's the one that's a self-propelled gun, and that's something like a 4.7-inch naval gun or something on it, isn't it?
Not sure. It could be that. It could also be they were sticking the 12.8 centimeter guns from
which is one of the static flak guns.
Or it was also the armament for the Jagdtiger. But Jagdtiger production was getting bombed, so they were sticking it on whatever chassis would take the weight.
And this doesn't have a proper armored turret, so that's going to save a lot of weight.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and a self-propelled gun. And we're just seeing off the end there. That's another Jagdpanzer.
Yeah, another Jagdpanzer built off, I believe, the E100 chassis. So instead of the turret of the E100, this is the Jagdpanzer on the same E100 chassis.
All of these never even made it to wooden mock-up stage. I don't think.
They were sketched on the back of a napkin somewhere found in the ruins of Berlin. Michael Wayne saying the Scorpion had a 12.8 centimeter gun in the computer game. So
okay.
Yeah, that was one of those. There's a chassis lying around doing nothing. Quick, stick one of these on it.
Maybe that's the next one over, which looks like it's got an even bigger gun. I remember one of them had a naval gun in it.
Right.
Whereas I'm pretty sure the 128 is one from using, like Berlin static batteries, like on the flak towers and things. Those guns were very big.
Yeah.
But they were generally used guns that they already used elsewhere, just in things bigger than tanks.
So if we want to look at the next line down, that's the American fantasy path.
So these are these fantasy or are these are real, aren't they?
Yeah. So the T95, or as I knew it in its development form, the T28. That's the Doom Turtle, I believe, which is a great big gun on a big heavily armored chassis, basically as an assault tank. The cool thing about that is it's got 4 tracks to take the weight. The outer 2 sets can be removed so that you can stick it on a flat car or actually transport the damn thing around.
To narrow the vehicle.
Yeah, to narrow the vehicle, you can unbolt the 2 outer sets of tracks.
Right, and stick them in a sleeve.
Stick them on the back. Yep.
Right.
Or have a bunch of men carry it around behind.
Because that's a huge limiting factor in tank design in the 40s. Is it's got to go on a railway car, and we can't rebuild our railway infrastructure.
And also it has to fit on a standard bridging bridge, because otherwise the first river you come to in Germany, it's like, hold the wall while we build a real bridge.
You can always put 2 side by side.
Yeah.
But you can't make your railway tracks wider.
You can't. In a hurry. No. Or the tunnels that railways go into.
But that was built in small numbers, just never went into serial production.
Yeah. A number of prototypes of that were built. The next one along, the M103, though, was actually used in service. The Marine Corps adopted it. And that was one of those, oh, crap, we saw the IS-3, we need something with an enormous gun on it.
Yes. Because the IS-3, there's a handful of them in the Soviet Victory Parade, isn't there? Which is in everybody to get the newsreel. They're like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, absolutely. Trek Ambelovich says, I see strange German sauerkraut movers. Yeah.
The M103, I mean, that looks very M60 like, and I'm seeing the M48, which is called a pattern like the M60. There's very similar design cues in what will be the M60, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And it's the technology of the time that we know how to make really big castings. That kind of thing from the American designers.
Right. So they all share that kind of unusual board hole shape underneath.
Yeah.
And the cast turret on top.
And again, that characterized a lot of the stuff they built in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
And that was just being developed from the M26 at the end of the war, the Pershing. So
And
that was starting to go through all the American design philosophy there.
right, and that M48, that's Korean era,
Yeah,
American mainline
absolutely.
tank.
So we'll be able to use that for Fate of a Nation and NAM and all sorts of fun things.
But they
I
were still
imagine.
using Shermans as well in Korea, weren't they? Like the Easy 8s, the later editions.
Yeah, because they had to start Korea with whatever they could find at posts in Japan. So
Right.
the Shermans were things like they were gate guards, and it's like, well, we haven't got any armor at all. Quick, stick an engine back in it, and we'll
Right.
take it to Korea.
Yes. I'm with you. Right, and then this kind of, between 1944 and 1990, I really know very little about armored vehicles. It's not a period that's ever really engaged me. That period, and there's a lot of development. So with these British stuffs, I mean, I've never even heard the term charioteer. So talk us through these three then. And
Yeah.
are they real or are they fantasy? What are they?
Again, the Tortoise was like the T-95 in that they were trying to develop a very heavily armored and well-armed assault tank. So this was basically the British version of the same requirement for an assault thing. And that was built, I think there were 8 prototypes.
Right.
Of which I think I've seen one at Bovington. So there is actually still one.
I feel I'd seen it, but I wasn't sure whether I'd seen the T95. These have very similar design cues. I feel I've seen something like this.
Yeah. And Charioteer was, oh crap, we need a big gun. Maybe we can stick it on an existing chassis. So it has a late war British chassis, and then they just stuck a 20-pounder gun on the damn thing.
Right.
I've actually seen a turret for one of those.
Challenger or something.
Sorry?
Is it like an upgun? Is it Challenger?
So that was the biggest gun that they could stick on a chassis at that point. It was bigger than anything they had on a tank in service. So it was like, we need the 20-pounder gun now.
Yeah.
Quick tack weld a big turret together and we'll stick it on a chassis. So that did enter service, limited service, in small numbers. But I've seen the turret for one at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum in Queensland.
Right.
So some of them ended up out here as range targets.
When we built a purpose-built tank, as opposed to a bodged together thing. All right, and Conqueror?
Conqueror is the British version of the M103. Again, we need a big tank. So that was like a high-low mix. So your main tanks would be your Centurions, but then you would have a troop of Conquerors with big guns to back you up. So if you came up against any heavy Russian armor, Conqueror were meant to come and poke holes in them for you.
Right. So it's a big gun version.
Yeah. So again, huge, heavy tank, had difficulty moving, that kind of stuff, but did actually enter service. I'm desperately waiting for Charioteer and Conqueror because I will just love to do some 1948 to 1950 Checkpoint Charlie stuff with those.
So, according to this, that's coming out, any day now. That's due slated for release in February. And there is a line of Russians which haven't fitted on the slide. And I suspect that they're all real tanks, the Russian ones.
Yeah, so
they are building new designs in that period.
Yeah, I can't remember what they were since I cropped them out of the picture.
T44 is never made in serious numbers, is it? But they've not made a model of that.
T44 was made in some numbers, but yeah, they've not made a model of that. I believe there was the T62.
That's much later. T54 they've already released with Wave 10, I think it was.
And IS3's out now.
And IS3 was the first one of these. So maybe there are some.
Is IS7 coming? I believe they announced IS7.
I think that might be one of them, yeah.
And again, that
wasn't a real tank, was it?
It was kind of a development prototype.
Yeah.
So Trekan says 2,000 T-44s were made.
Yeah, which by the Soviets is nothing. I realize that feels like a lot if you're used to looking at Tiger and Panzer numbers.
Yeah.
The Soviets build them in serial production in the tens of thousands. But I mean, they were still using T-34 85s in the 70s.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
the reserve formations.
Yeah.
Because they have them.
So Ernst Udo Peters said, did they get rid of comets very quickly?
I thought it was a mainline tank for a while.
It is a mainline tank into the 1950s. We had tons of them over here that were based in Singapore.
Right.
So the British forces over here had them because it wasn't going to be, facing Soviet hordes or anything in service here.
Yeah.
So...
Or not quickly.
Not quickly, no.
A lot was going to have to change before that would happen, yeah.
But again, I mean, the end of the war for the British was they were playing catch-up the entire war, and right at the end in 44, 45, started churning out some very good designs. So, I mean, Cromwell was good, Comet was great, and then it was quickly overtaken by Centurion. So it's just that case of, wow, it's a great tank, but it's not as great as the next one we just finished.
Yeah. Because we never faced the Soviets, and the Soviets had big, heavy tanks in large numbers.
Yes, absolutely.
The Germans had some very high performance vehicles, but never in numbers in the way that the Soviets did.
Yeah,
I think that's the big change that everybody knows. So one of the things I don't really get about the Battle of the Bulge, by the way, is you've built this magnificent beast, the King Tiger.
Yeah,
but you put it up against Shermans, mate. You don't need this for that. And it's going to really struggle to get through that terrain. This is the wrong vehicle for the job.
Yeah. So I'm still writing the review for Jagdtiger. And I think one of the conclusions I came to with that was if you stuck it into combat, you got tactical advantage there. Like it would blow holes through two Shermans sitting in a row.
Yeah, and it's pretty much indestructible.
There wasn't enough of them, and you couldn't. When you're fighting a defensive war, you need to be able to move your limited combat power from where I need it here to where I need it there. So yeah, it was just a waste of time because it won where it was, but there were just so many more Shermans somewhere else where there weren't Jagdtigers.
You're going to move it to a jumping off point by train.
Yeah.
Defensively, that doesn't work so well. Yeah. It's a strange vehicle, and a lot of those, and that's the problem why these German vehicles are a bit nonsense. They're horrifically underpowered for what they're doing. They don't have the kind of exotic materials to make the alloys and so forth. They're just never going to be able to do it, and yet we managed to make vehicles of comparable weight and better performance in the 50s. So we had the right stuff to make them with.
Well, they also had Ferdinand Porsche leaping out of the bushes every 5 minutes to offer you a new propulsion system or a weird suspension.
Which required minerals that they didn't have.
Yeah, but I mean, there's 11 Jagdtigers out there with different suspension because Ferdinand Porsche turned up one day with them in the back of the truck going, let's try this.
Yeah.
Here's some I built already.
Yeah. Let's have a look. What we got? Assuming the German super heavies weren't able to... Yeah. No, I mean, I think for offensive operations, they definitely the Bulge. Those vehicles definitely went into action and made some distance, but they ran out of steam and they ran out of fuel. Most of them were actually abandoned and dynamited by their own crews.
Yeah,
they weren't taken out in most cases. They just were stuck. King Tiger was made for a different war, not for the setting it was put. Absolutely, and I think those things, like on the Russian front, I think they would have made far more difference. But I think you have to remember that this operation is sort of planned in the autumn. We're going way off topic. What we're going to talk about. It's planned in the autumn of 44 that they're recovering from the Falaise Pocket disaster, but you run into the Hergen Forest. It's like, okay, this Allied advance isn't going so well. We still have the hope of being able to cut off a chunk of one of the Allied armies and drive them back into the sea. Because if we don't, we're going to lose. I don't actually disagree with the strategic decision. I agree with almost all of the operational decisions they make. It's like, well, there's no point in launching it until you've got enough fuel for them to get there. Yeah. That's a really bad idea.
You need less fuel if you let them advance closer to you. So, if it's just a waiting game.
Right.
Come and get us.
If you have to cut them off at the sea, you don't. You still got to go all that distance.
Yeah.
But when they got to put them in position beforehand, they're fine. You know, they've got their operational reliability is sufficient for today's battle in most cases. It's just not sufficient for this month's battle. What was this? Sorry, what, lads? Could you please queue up your tanks in a straight rounds? I have a few pounds of ammo left.
Yeah.
John's back. Germans could have done with loads more Panthers than the really big stuff. Absolutely, they just couldn't produce them in the numbers. I understood it.
But even, I mean, Panthers were hard to produce. Like, they took a lot of man hours to make a Panther go.
Yeah. The Germans never seem to be able to do what the Americans in particular, but the Soviets also. That serial production. I want to make the same tank but cheaper. I want to make the same tank but cheaper and cheaper.
Hey, Johnny.
Texting you guys, little pig, let me in. It's not going to last.
Manufacturing of German tanks, even Panzer IVs in 43,
you
know, which is a much lighter vehicle. They're in individual bays.
Yeah,
they're not on a production line. It's like these 3 or 4 guys make the whole tank.
Yeah,
that's incredibly skilled, as opposed to you see in American factories. My job is to put this pin in this rivet, dink, and the thing goes along, and I put another rivet in the next one. You know, the Germans never got to that.
So let's talk about. So all this stuff is coming,
and soon, and we know because Peter said it on last year's video with me, said it publicly. They've already planned out to Wave 18 for World of Tanks, and I did not see models, but I assume it's more of this kind of thing. It's paper Panzers and it's 1950s,
and that's the bread and butter for the World of Tanks war game, isn't it?
It's the World of Tanks stuff that we haven't got yet from the upper tiers. Yeah.
So Lake War Leviathan. So it's like we've got all this plastic. We'd better roll it into Flames of War. So they've announced that there's a PDF coming so that you can take these paper tanks or the limited production tanks or prototypes or whatever and play them in Flames of War. I do like that they've done this not the way they did with Mid-War Monsters, where they'll turn up in tournaments because it's in a main rulebook. This is going to be separate. So if you want to play a game with a whole bunch of paper Panzers in it, that's fine. But, you know, you're not going to have a stupid fantasy list to every tournament you go to because there's going to be fantasy tanks everywhere in Late War.
Yes. Well, because most of this, the fantasy is twofold. It's not just that it's a paper Panzer. It's that it's a paper Panzer that could have been in production in 1948.
Yeah.
You know, and that's if you want to play like the war took longer because it went differently, this is what it may have looked like.
But it just means there's absolutely no fun in taking your sort of 1944 British Sherman list from Italy or D-Day to a late war tournament where somebody else is running around in E100s or whatever.
I disagree, Henry, because I think they'd be running around in E101, and I never think that those mega tanks are worth buying.
I have played that game where I had a bunch of Panthers chasing around an elephant, and I could bail it, but I couldn't kill it. So there was just this comedy thing of like 6 or 8 turns of my tanks following it around like a bunch of ducks, shooting it up the arse as often as they could, but that was it.
Yeah. How do you think that would be placed at tournaments, Harry? Because you go to tournaments. Like, what is the threat level of you turning up and that list being your opponent?
Oh, yeah. We get guys who turn up with... There was one guy that turned up with a list that was just Tigers. So he took as many Tigers as he could get in the number of points. No infantry, no nothing else, no Stugs, no nothing. Just as many Tigers as I can get in my list and 2 airplanes.
And he won the tournament, obviously.
No, he didn't. He got slaughtered, but it was really funny to watch.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't. If you want to bring some nonsense paper Panzer in that costs you 40 points, you're going to lose. I think Flames of War does a good job of pointing those things silly, so they're not wanting. But that's personal. I understand the frustration of what you described, but I think you should still be winning that game. Personally.
Oh yeah, but it's me playing, so that's a big handicap.
Right. Okay, fine.
But yeah, so the
So they're
fact
coming,
that this
and
is
it's
a
a
separate
PDF,
PDF.
and with every
So
reason to believe that it's a free. It's going to be a free PDF on their website. I think. Can't
I
guarantee that.
assume so, but I don't know. But hey, it would be cute. But it just means, I mean, they would have sunk hundreds of thousands of dollars into creating all the molds for all of these for World of Tanks, so you might as well roll them into Flames of War as well.
Right. Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
does that mean we should then say this is coming in April?
Yeah.
A whole shiny new game.
This isn't Flames of War.
This isn't Flames of War. It is apparently based
Right. Yeah.
on the Flames of War rules, but this is definitely a beer and pretzels armor versus armor game. There's going to be no infantry or anything in this, as far as I'm aware.
No. So this is for anyone. For anyone that wants, I think, from what we've seen of this, for anyone that wants Flames of War Light as an introductory game,
Yeah.
which is just tanks, so you don't have to worry about aircraft, artillery, or infantry rules, which as a beginner definitely slow the game down quite a lot. And you just want a big tank park.
Yeah.
This is this game. There's two things about this game. I think one is it looks like it's based on Flames of War, but it is. See, the Flames of War branding is not on this. It's got Guild Force 9 badging on it. It's the same vehicles. But this is, I think, with all of these vehicles that you've just saw, so far as is described, but it's got procedurally generated missions. That's kind of a big part of this when Pete was talking about in his own Christmas address, is you're kind of going to assemble a mission by drawing cards from 3 different decks. This is the objective, this is the unique conditions, and this is the deployment. Or that I don't remember whether it was 3, but it was something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for games like beer and pretzels type games that are an hour or 2, is that you need sometimes you can get into a bit of a rut if you just play with your mates. It's like, this guy's force is clearly better than mine. But as soon as you get objectives and some kind of separate scoring system, can really mix with that interaction. I can understand why in tournament situations, people don't like not knowing until they get to the table how that's going to play out. Most tournaments have mission packs to tell you what mission you're going to play and in what order, right? So people plan their lists around that.
Yeah, no, we tend to roll for it. So there's actually there's a mechanism that you take a stance basically if you're a defensive player.
So you can kind of push that, and it's still only going to be one of the 6 basic missions.
Yeah.
It's not going to say you're in that corner and you have to get off the same table edge. Which when you draw cards, that can happen.
Yeah. I am interested to see if any of the stuff they introduce for Clash of Steel for those missions actually end up rolling back through to Flames of War, though, because I think they're using this to experiment the hell out of missions.
Yeah.
And that there will be some lessons learned from this. And it is interesting because with this, it's not biggest tank wins. The objectives that you might draw out of the deck.
Highest score wins.
Highest score wins, and you can score stuff not by killing everybody else's tanks. So if you do end up in the situation where your armor is significantly outclassed, you still might be able to pull out a win if you hold an objective or do something. So I'm kind of interested to see how that's going to work.
Because in Flames of War, although it has objectives, the way that the securing objectives works, essentially you have to obliterate the units in that half of the board.
Yeah. To be able to have uncontested control.
Before you be able to assert control.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, I think it's a lot freer in that, and there's a lot more objectives, and they're a lot more likely to be in the middle of the table.
And again, it's not
the war. My objectives are as near to me as I can make them, and as far apart from each other as I can make them.
But I also think some of the things that you can earn victory points for in this aren't holding pieces of ground. So it might be performing something or knock out something, or that there are other non-combat ways of actually scoring victory points in this, which will be interesting to see. I do think Clash of Steel is an interesting choice, though, because you had World of Tanks and you had Flames of War. There seemed to be a very limited space in between to insert Clash of Steel, like something that has a more complex rule set than
Well, it's a
World of
less,
Tanks.
but I think the thing about the Tanks the Miniatures game is it doesn't lead you on to Flames of War. There's no overlapping system. There's no relationship, and probably the forces you've assembled don't transfer very well. Whereas this is a game of tank platoons, as from what I've seen, it's a game where you're playing tank platoons against tank platoons, and you're using rules, if not the same, then very similar to Flames of War. You're just not using infantry and artillery and planes.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
That's much better kind of entry point to Flames of War.
So I'm just having a chuckle because Will GM for Food just commented that he thinks one of the objectives might be stealing gold bullion from a bank behind enemy lines. I would absolutely play that. I would play that game.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely should make a Scio cast miniature, but a tank commander.
Yeah.
They should make Scio cast tank commanders from that.
You used to actually be able to buy a resin version of that tank with the speakers on the side and stuff from Kelly's Heroes. So if anybody hasn't seen Kelly's Heroes, that's an excellent film.
It certainly is.
A great war film that you should watch.
This looks. I'm most interested in this in terms of working with the kids at school because I feel like we'll be able to bridge the gap. And Tanks takes a bit of time because of the dice matching. It's not an intuitive game. You've got to learn it itself.
Yeah.
What I like about this is if they can play this, I can then come in, a couple of months later and say, all right, let's stick some artillery down on the board. I'm going to tell you how that works. Yeah. And then by the time they're sort of halfway through high school, they're just playing Flames of War.
Yeah.
All bad.
Because I have a really dedicated group of boys that play tanks, which is great. But it never, they would move on if there was somewhere to move on to.
Yeah, right. Fair enough.
Sweet.
So,
and I assume that this is going to be similar price to their other stuff, like their Clash, because they've got a Clash of Steel box set for Flames of War. But
so they're going to come out with American versus Soviet, which is the one we can see here, and there's another one which is British versus Soviet.
British versus German.
British versus German, sorry. Yeah, which has the mouse and a bunch of other stuff in it.
The sci-fi German tanks.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, to get a box set with 21 tanks in it, that's a lot of tanks.
It is, but as I say, I think that these versus they have the army boxes have got their price, and then Peter talked about 2-player starter sets, which is how they describe like that Clash of Steel and Stalingrad box. They're at that lower price because they're aimed at getting started. They're not necessarily good collection builders in the same way.
Yeah. And they're not all big fantasy tanks, are they? There's stuff like the Chaffee and things like that, the M24 in there as well. So you've got some fantasy tanks, and then they bulk them out with some
just a standard
real World War II tanks. Yeah,
I'm not 100% on that. I mean, then they're going to need light tanks, and they're going to need tanks for other roles, I think. Yeah, because I think the game's going to have a little bit of granularity in that space, and I get the feeling, but I'm not sure that that you might be able to get like specialist tank crew and things. Some of the elements from World of Tanks, will bleed into in the way that the command cards work in Flames of War. Yeah, but more aimed at like a specific tank or a specific unit.
Yeah.
But that's kind of mostly guesswork on my part. But I think that there were some pictures that included some cards.
Yeah. So we are also extrapolating a lot of this stuff from pictures. So I mean, I've seen pictures of a Clash of Steel battle that included Panthers on the German side and Comets on the British side and Chaffies on the American side.
Yeah.
So that's Clash of Steel, and that was interesting because that came kind of out of nowhere because they'd been talking about Checkpoint Charlie.
This was the big thing that Pete told us last year that
that you weren't allowed to tell anybody about. Yeah.
And it has had more than one name. They've settled on Clash of Steel now, but it's had a few different names.
Okay.
And I remember saying, "You're not just going to call it Paper Panzers then?" He's like, "Absolutely
not." Don't do that to me, Kaiser. Okay. All right. Oh dear. All right.
So that might be apocryphal. I might be just making it up.
Yeah.
All right. What we got? What we got next? People
The
been gagging with it.
Pacific.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Pacific is coming this year.
Woohoo.
So it's mid-war Pacific, 1942, 1943. Although Pacific War-wise, that's pretty early on because, 1942 was still the Japanese advance through there. 200-plus page book, apparently, and 3 nations that they're bringing out, the US, the Japanese, and now they're going to do British Far East forces. Which will be interesting. I don't think there's going to be a lot of new stuff in those, unless they bring out like Indian infantry for the British or Australians or what have you.
I don't know. I certainly don't know anything specific, but I get the feeling that if there was new hard plastic infantry for this, we would know about it.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
they've been quite open about like what's going to get you excited. We want to tell you.
Yeah. So
I mean,
I'm guessing that if there is infantry, they'll end up being metal or Siocast because they do already have existing metal sculpts.
Yes.
For a bunch of those forces, but Japanese plastic tanks.
Whether they'll make 1 or 2, because I think quite a few of them run off similar holes. They might do. They wouldn't necessarily have told us that. They might want to save something. Definitely those in the picture. That's a Valentine, a Sherman, and a Grant, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
picture.
that's all existing plastic.
The plastic's been around for a few years. That came up with a mid-war release, isn't it? That stuff.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the Far East is it is quite one-sided with the armor.
It is a little bit one-sided with the army.
We
yes.
ship the Grants and stuff out there because they're a bit garbage, but they're so much better than not having a tank.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. Whereas, like, all right, the Japanese don't really have any anti-tank guns or tanks. It's fine.
Yeah.
Great.
Because the Japanese stuff, they started in the 1920s and 30s building license-produced versions of, British Vickers designs and that kind of stuff. And they start designing their own indigenous things, but it's based off that 1930s level of technology.
Yeah.
So no good.
And you have to remember, like Japan in the 1890s is a medieval society.
Yeah, so they have built an industrial base.
It hasn't been able to industrialize everywhere and everything as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And its naval and aviation industry are some of the best in the world by 1930. But that's going to mean there's gaps somewhere else.
Yeah.
And automotive industry, practically non-existent. To be fair, they do make tanks in the hundreds, but they don't make them in the thousands, and they have armies of millions.
Yes.
So, but there are in the major Japanese offensives do normally involve a couple of hundred tanks.
Yeah.
But about
and again, it's not that they're bad tanks, but just they're out of their time, basically.
Yes.
They don't have anything coming through to replace them that matches tank development over that 5 to 10 year period of the war. You start the war with
the Vickers light tank and the one.
Yeah. And you end the war with Comet Centurion and Jagdtiger. It's like, wow.
But Japan never faces those things either. It doesn't need them in the same way. I mean,
but also
its main war is against the Chinese.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who don't even have rifles, let alone tanks.
Yeah, but their military is also very competitive. So the Navy is versus the Army. There are factions in the Army. So I don't think the armor faction in the Army had a lot of sway. So, not the same way that the Japanese Navy was like cutting edge, use of radar, good guns, that kind of stuff. That they matched anything in the world, but not in numbers, and it wasn't even across their military. So I think the tank force was like,
way down on the list of the tertiary service.
Absolutely.
Yeah, most of the famous Japanese aircraft are naval designs, not army designs as well. Like the Zero, this one, but many of them they're actually naval design aircraft. Are better than the army ones. They don't say, do you not want to make this one? It's No, this is our design.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
huge.
Will GM for Food is saying, armor advocates not getting traction in an island nation? Go figure. So yeah,
It's a
that'd
big
be why the
island,
Navy
mate.
was big. It's a big island, but it's lumpy.
True. You can say that about Australia.
Australia's dead flat.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh,
The
I
things
thought you
we
had loads
have
of mining
mountains
rights,
wouldn't
didn't you? There
count
were
in
mountains
Europe.
in the middle.
No, we got mountains up one side, but they're only little weeny ones.
The only baby ones. All right.
Yeah.
So Pacific being an interesting one. I don't want to sound too negative. I just don't. So my personal feeling in terms of Flames of War as a game is it's not its best when you're fighting with infantry-based forces.
Yes.
I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying you can't do it and it isn't competitive. I'm saying it's not fun in the world. So infantry are best when they stand still in Flames of War, and the Pacific War is going to be very heavily infantry based.
Interestingly, I have been charged by Japanese troops in Mid-War Flames of War. We played some earlier version 3 stuff. And there were special rules for the Japanese, and they sucked. Like, my British had a hard time fending them off.
Right, they didn't suck as in they were bad. You mean it sucked to be charged by them?
It sucked to be charged by them because that hurt. Yeah, I had a lot of guys get samurai sworded.
I saw them bamboo spears.
Ow, stop that.
I mean, the history of that, despite the movies, is quite different.
Yes.
The high command of the Japanese army told their commanders to stop doing this because they were hemorrhaging manpower and achieving nothing.
Yeah.
And you read the accounts of especially the Marines on Guadalcanal, early on, they had quite a bit of this.
Yeah.
They were like, we are mowing these guys down.
Absolutely. It's
terrifying to experience, but
it's not a survivable tactic for them, but yeah, so if you don't think that it's going to hurt you when the Japanese charge you, it will. But again, I think this is for the people who have been screaming for the Pacific, and there have been a lot of them. They're very, very passionate about it.
Yeah.
But I can see why it's also not been an absolute number one priority for Battlefront, because it is a niche market that they will sell some stuff into. Yeah.
I think it certainly would be interesting with British and American forces. I love the fact they're including the British in that. That whole kind of campaign, and not just all the disasters, but they're holding the line on the Burma border and so forth.
Yeah.
And then by 43, the sort of early counter-offensive taking place, and the British have got armored forces. You've got much more blended forces.
Yeah.
So you're going to have quite asymmetric battles.
Yeah.
And again, I find that could be interesting. And it's kind of the way I like to play Flames of War is it's mostly tanks.
Yeah.
I would say that's when I feel the game is like speedy and dynamic.
This will play very much like playing NAM. So the US and the Australian sides tend to have a lot of stuff. But you just have to fend off waves and waves and waves of infantry attacks.
Right. You're a very capable unit, very powerful units, but not very many of them.
Yeah.
In relation to the number
if I remember, when you destroy a unit in NAM for some of the infantry-based forces, they recycle.
Right.
So that unit can come back again later.
Right.
If they make a roll.
Trekan Belovic. I disagree, Kaiser. I played infantry D-Day battle, though standing still was a good idea. My infantry was wiped away by artillery. I mean, artillery is the counter in Flames of War to infantry.
And that's what they did in V4. You used to be able to play what they called Sitzkrieg, which if you dug in your infantry, there was very little that could dig them out. But that whole thing of you have to re-roll saves with the repeat bombardment, that was specifically don't just hide in the bottom of your foxhole.
But they're still very tough to move. You need to stick your artillery on them from the beginning of the game.
Yeah, and just keep pounding them and pounding them.
Yeah, but they will die.
Much like OnlyFans.
Indeed. I'm not saying you won't enjoy it. I mean, one of the things I say a lot passionately believe is I think I think it's important that there is a difference of opinion out there on things, that we have debate, we have discussion, we have views. Because I think too much online content is kind of regurgitating the same kind of feedback and the same kind of views. I'm just giving you my opinion and my feeling. So Pacific, I definitely will try it just because I think I can use all my Desert War stuff for a British force. And the uniforms are all different. Yeah. And I definitely would probably, I don't know, I'd be interested in doing it. The Kokoda Trail is kind of company-sized actions, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
New Guinea. Yeah. That's about, you know, checkpoints and company to battalion-sized operations. So that probably suits Flames of War in scale. But again, I think it's all rifles and machine guns, Kokoda Trail, right?
Absolutely.
And floppy hat.
And they were our reservists. So
right.
Our guys were still either in North Africa or just coming back and reorganizing from North Africa. So the guys who actually were on the Kokoda Trail were reservists. They were called Chocos, the chocolate soldiers, because they were expected to melt away when there was any heat.
Right.
And yet the Chocos did an excellent job.
Reservists are former soldiers. They're not rookies. They might not be young. It's one of the things that irritates me about the First World War when you hear the term boy soldiers. The average age of a World War I soldier was nearly 30.
Yeah.
And loads of them were in their 40s. They were all old soldiers brought back.
I know.
They know how to clean a rifle and shoot straight and all that stuff. The stuff that you absolutely need to train people in. They can already do it. Anyway.
So the unconfirmed rumor I have about the Pacific is that it's due for release in the middle of the year sometime.
In the summer?
Yeah, July, August. Well, your summer, yes.
August. Okay. That's an interesting time because that's around about D-Day.
Yeah. So Clash of Steel is April, I believe. The first box sets are coming out for that.
Right.
So then we would roll into this. So, but yeah, the D-Day stuff would have to be releasing in June. So probably Clash of Steel, the D-Day box set re-releases, and then the Pacific.
Yeah.
But again, that's absolutely unconfirmed.
Yeah. My gut feeling for this is in terms of a release is that they'll probably handle it a bit like they do with the Flames of War, with the Great War, is that you're not going to see this everywhere after the initial release. It'll be a big release and a push and amount of stuff goes out there. But kind of beyond that, it'll probably be only like really committed Flames of War stockists.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of it's going to be metal. Because
Yeah.
it's the different infantry types is one of the thing that flavors this war.
Absolutely.
The tanks in plastic we've already had, you know, but it's the fact that you want Australians or Indians or US Marines and I can't imagine them not being in metal at this stage. They would have made a big thing about it, I think.
Yeah, they would have. And again, they're talking about we'll talk a little bit in a minute about the Team Yankee plastic infantry that's coming out, but they're still developing that. That's not a big thing that they've got nailed down yet. But before we talk about that, we should probably talk about this. So if we rub our crystal balls together, apparently Early War's coming in early 2025. So,
now, this is going to be popular, right?
Absolutely. It will be hugely popular. And again, I'm a convert to Early War. I got forced to play some because there was some tournaments that were set in that era. And it's fun. Like, all the tanks armor is paper thin. But, you know, I saw massive engagements between Italian light tankettes and French guys on motorcycles. And it was just like, wow. And the motorcycles won in the end.
I kept saying to Pete when he was talking about this in summer about Early War, and I was saying, come on, you got to make motorcycle troops. You got to do it in plastic. If there's something about the Early War that everybody cans, everybody goes to war with motorcycle, but everyone ditches them because it's a bad idea, but everyone does it. I think it's a real icon of the Early War.
Same with the bicycles as well. There was an awful lot of invading France by bicycle.
With a bell, though. With a bell.
Bing, bing.
Yep.
Now, Peter's view on this was he doesn't like to make gamers pay for cosmetic models. Like to buy motorbike troops, they drive on the table, they get off their motorbikes, and they're just infantry. You can just have that written on the card. Don't make the guy buy motorcycle models. He's not wrong, but I just think they're really cool.
They are really cool. I'd love to see them too.
I'm still hoping. But this early war thing,
you're in the best place to bend Pete's ear than anybody at the moment. So you just keep hammering at him.
With him once, hopefully
once a year.
Yeah.
Well, he said we should do this again, but let's see if he still feels that way. I should get in touch with him as we get a bit closer. Definitely, and I really hope that he does. It was a fantastic interview. It was a great day.
It was great fun.
We know quite a bit about this because it's been creeping up, and we've heard a bit more and more over time. And one of the things that that Battlefront have been quite clear about is that they're not just going to re-release all the old resin and metal and just say, "Okay, there you go, you've got your early war, and I'll be quiet."
Plastic.
We're going to do it. We're going to do it right. It's going to be in plastic, and there are, I can't remember what you said, but we are talking about a dozen plus new plastic. I actually think significantly more than that. I just can't remember quite what you said at Christmas.
But there is an awful lot coming. And what they're doing is they're breaking it down by era. So the first release is going to be Blitzkrieg. So the Battle for France in 1940.
I think by campaign is probably the more accurate term. It's the Battle for France is what's coming out at the beginning. So that doesn't mean that they're ignoring the fact that Poland was where it started.
Yeah.
That's just not their big first release.
That'll come later.
That'll come later where there'll be a lot of overlap in the equipment they've already released. But the Battle for France is something that we are going to see pretty fully. Fully is a big word.
Comprehensively. But there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, that 3D render, Hotchkiss tanks, there's got to be some Renaults turning up. I saw an outline for what looked like a Shah B1.
Yeah, let's hope the Zuma, which is one of the vaguely useful French tanks.
Yeah.
Still got a one-man turret, though, hasn't it, I think?
It still does have... Well, I mean, that was the French turret. That's like... it doesn't matter what your tank's like. You put one of these on it. And a bunch of cruiser tanks for the Brits. So I'm guessing that's where the Matilda in plastic will show up. A13 cruisers, that kind of thing.
We're gonna see, as a betting man, we're gonna see 3 to 6 plastic German, French, and British 1939 vehicles.
Yeah,
and we're gonna see new infantry, and we're gonna see new guns, and I think he's pretty much said this is all in plastic. I don't know whether he said it definitely is, but I think he has.
Yeah, I think it's
that's
certainly the intention.
That this is like the company, I think, is like financially in a position that the next time we do like a big new release, it's going all that way. He said a few times he hates putting out a box set where he can't put the sticker or plastic on it.
Yeah,
that little badge that they put on it. It's like this is what we want, and we know that's what you want.
And for the British, there'll be a lot of stuff you can roll into the desert. So if they bring out plastic Matildas, I'll be able to stick Matildas on my.
And Matilda 2, definitely.
Matilda
I don't know whether they shipped Matilda 1s to the desert.
No, they didn't. But Panzer 38Ts would be nice if they turned up in plastic.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already surprised they don't do that. But I think the next big early war one is going to be Barbarossa. Just as a size of thing, and then you'll see more German vehicles, and you'll see the Soviet ones, because these are the big armies. Then you want to cover the early war period in 2 big releases. You do it that way. They're the big campaigns.
And you and I were discussing that in the Panzer 38Ts weren't a big part of the invasion of France. They were still. They had captured those, they were incorporating them, and they were big in Barbarossa.
But they were a huge part of the Panzerwaffe. Yeah, because they kept building them. They not only did they steal a load from the Czechs in 38, they'd been building them for 2 more years by the time they went into Barbarossa. Yeah, but the annexation Czechoslovakia it's 38, isn't it? Or is it early 30, very early 39? But anyway, the point is that they don't capture. They steal a lot of equipment when they nick the country, but the factories are still running for 2 more years.
Absolutely.
And so in France, you get a lot of the slightly earlier, slightly weaker 35. I think it's 35T. It's similar, but it's not quite as good.
But those they don't continue to manufacture, I believe. So they used whatever of those they
all over
captured.
to the 38T, and that's the significant contribution about equipping several panzer divisions in Barbarossa. So I think you'd see that's the kind of vehicle that I think you'd see in that, and you're probably going to see early versions of vehicles we've already got. I think they'll make
Panzer
III and Panzer IV. Although you can already make an early one, things like the
short-barreled Stug
and the short, So I'll be interested to see how the language of that, because currently they describe them as early and late, but now they're going to be doing
really early.
Yeah.
So Trekkan wants to see the Soviet T-38 and T-35s in.
I don't think you're going to see a T-35 in plastic, mate.
So those are the multi-turreted, huge Soviet things.
Yeah.
What you might see is the
paper panzers,
what's the Neubaufahrzeug, whatever, the newly built vehicle, the German multi-turret thing.
No, you're not going to see any of that nonsense in plastic.
Oh, please.
Please,
Mr. Kaiser. No,
but
okay.
I would seriously suspect the big thing that maybe people don't necessarily want, that's a big part of Barbarossa, is like T-26 and the BT series.
Yeah.
My guess is that they'll make a plastic one or the other. Probably the BT, because that's a bit later.
Yeah. Neubaufahrzeug, apparently, according to Trekkan. Thank you, Trekkan.
I'm hoping for plastic 222s.
That would be nice.
Something that's missing from the current lineup.
So we are discussing Battlefront, but there are other manufacturers who produce some of this stuff in plastic that we'll say no more about.
Right. I didn't know anyone did a plastic 222. But anyway, that plastic
I've got a whole bunch.
Would definitely be nice, because again, that runs you into the middle, and even some of them kicking around in the late war.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the other things you need to think about with as gamers and modelers, we really like the kind of fullness of the range, but the reality of the stat profile in Flames of War is what is the difference between a 222 and another 20 mil armed German armored car, and in the Flames of War stats, there's no difference. Now they definitely weren't that; they were this in this particular unit. But because those, so I don't think we'll see the six rad German armored cars, for example. But I think we might well see something like a 222.
That would be great.
That's pure speculation. But I don't think you'll see the 6-wheelers because they're just not around for long.
No.
They're almost all replaced by the 8-wheelers.
So early war should be really interesting for people, and there'll be a whole slew of great stuff that comes out for that in plastic. But again, we don't have a lot of details. I think
we'll be hearing a lot about it as we approach it. But I think, like everything we've seen, I think you're going to see, because they've said they're going to do the Invasion of Paris, you're going to see a British Army box, a German Army box, a French Army box, and probably a German versus French 2-player start set. There might be a German versus French and a German versus British, where the German army is a bit different, but I don't know if there'll be enough plastic to make them sufficiently different.
No, you might
they
not.
may do both, they may not. But I think you're going to see something like that. It's great, isn't it? We're just totally guessing, but it's based upon what they've done before.
It's totally informed bullshitting is what we're doing just at this moment.
And if I have a concern about early war, it's firepower checks.
Yeah. Early war plays very differently. You poke holes in things and then they just keep driving.
Yeah. Because of the way that the Flames of War through Team Yankee, their system, is the bigger the gun, the bigger the bore of the gun, the bursting charge of the shell, the higher the firepower rating. but its anti-tank power is based upon its velocity. In early war, you might have a high velocity gun, but it doesn't have a very big bursting charge,
Yeah,
which
it
means
doesn't.
you penetrate, and then you don't. There's a lot of 5-up firepower. In fact, pretty much everything is 5-up firepower in early war, isn't it?
Except my most effective anti-tank guns, which are my 25-pounders. If you roll your tanks in range of my 25-pounders, I will turn you into cheese.
Yes, but they'll be a lot dearer in early war.
They will. They'll be ludicrous, but they're absolutely worth it.
Yeah. But I'm pretty excited about this. It's the chance to get back on the same boards that I've already got, simply to play a very different game that plays differently. And yeah, I think we're going to see a whole bunch of new sculpts, which are going to be exciting. Early war, and not too long to wait.
Which brings us on to this.
This surprised
me.
There's more. This is the last one, though, Johnny. I'm glad to see your phone is working and you've been able to stick with us.
Well, don't jinx it, man. Don't jinx it.
All right. So there is Soviet and US hard plastic infantry coming for Team Yankee, apparently. Kazi, you and I were having...
You're seeing the image there. This is the Soviet.
They are coming, so that's the Soviets. I didn't have any sprue shots of the US, so that's... Yeah, we'll see them when they come out. Interesting. I mean, they look fine. We were saying earlier it's kind of funny because the Team Yankee Soviet flexible plastic infantry are probably the best flexible plastic infantry they ever did.
They were decent sculpts. They
were decent sculpts and they worked okay. But it'll be interesting to see how these work.
Absolutely. So yeah, Michael, I think as Harry just said, just to reiterate, the first kind of tranche of this, and we don't know whether there's any more, is there's US and there's Soviet plastic slated for this year. All the Team Yankee stuff has been in metal, except the Soviets. They had the soft plastic. They've done some bits in Cyocast, I think, but they've not really gone for it with this. But what is interesting about these two sprues, Harry, is unlike most of their late World War II infantry, is it two different sprues.
Yes.
Soviets. That's not two
one of them's a heavy weapons sprue, though.
Yeah.
So you may get several of the infantry ones and one or two of the heavy weapons ones.
But it's not just one sprue, and like that's your lot. They've done it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are these the grenade launchers? I'm not sure what these tubes are. They obviously fit to a base.
So there's Cornet ATGMs on there, and there's the AGS-17 grenade launcher that I can see. So, or grenade machine gun, as they refer to it in Soviet parlance. So yeah, they basically treat it like a machine gun with explosive rounds.
Terrifying.
So this is really pleasing to see, because this isn't just part of a big release. This is just them like, look, we are slowly trying to move everything in hard plastic. We know you want it. It's not like they're totally refreshing the US plastic range tanks or anything. Just like, all right, we're going to do the Team Yankee infantry this year in the two major factions. And the thing with Team Yankee is you say Soviets and you say US, but actually a lot of the Third Nations uniforms look quite similar.
They do. Yeah.
You know, sometimes the camouflage pattern is quite different if you can see it at your age. I can't always tell at mine. But these will be pretty not universally flexible, depending on how fussy you are, but reasonably flexible to cover a range of forces as well.
Yes.
So really delighted to see the two sprues there. The thing that if I have a gripe or an ulcer with Flames of War stuff, is that because they've said so many different materials in terms of soft plastic, hard plastic, metal, Cyocast, and then different sculptors mixed into that, is you end up with stuff where your riflemen look really different from your artillery crew.
Yes.
Or your grenade launcher team is in metal, but your infantry are in plastic. And you know, the metal ones have got like, you know, chocolate finger figures with just a line and a gap in there or whatever, and they just they don't fit well on the base.
Yeah.
or next to one another.
No,
And so,
as you become an older gamer, that stuff becomes less and less interesting because you just can't see it. So it's
yeah,
quite good.
Irrelevant.
you're just
Yeah.
glad that you painted them 10 years ago and you don't have to look anymore.
Look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think it'll be very interesting if they do this in British for Team Yankee, because the gun barrels on SLRs are long and thin.
I
There'd be an
put
awful
their
lot of
metal-
breakages.
Yeah, I've painted the Team Yankee British. Johnny B's used them. I painted just
Yeah.
the one oversized platoon, I think.
Yeah.
I'm going to eventually get around to doing the full company. And yeah, the SLR, it's like a pin sticking out the
Yeah,
end of
it
it.
is.
And if it's bent, leave it, or you're going to snap it off.
Yeah.
Or snap it off and accept it. But trying to straighten it, they're very thin. Yeah.
That's also a very OnlyFans thing, yeah. Don't snap it off. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because I mean the AK-47 or 74, it's thick enough. It's supported halfway along by the gas feed system. The M16, it's just a short bit at the end, but the SLR, that is a long piece of unsupported plastic that's relatively thin.
I think if you look at the way these are done, they're not even joined at the head in terms of on the sprue. They're just done at the bases. I think they'll be able to do it like this because it's not connecting to anything else. You don't have to cut it off. You don't have to cut it off sprue. I really like the look of this sprue. I've got to say that it's like I'm not seeing two guys in the same pose.
Yeah.
24 figures there, including. And the thing about your team, your modern infantry, sort of post 1950s, is there's a lot more weapons in the squad. There's a lot more range. It's not 9 riflemen and a machine gun and a guy with a submachine gun. There's a variety of that, including much more machine guns, I think. So that's good. We've not seen the American one, but they have said they're going to do it. I assume that they'll come out together, and I think it's likely they'll again package it with a new starter set for Team Yankee.
Yeah, there was rumors that there's a 2-player starter set that'll come out with these.
As a kind of, it might even be like the launch box for this. So you get the IFVs and the infantry in this box as opposed to the tanks.
And then they'll have an all plastic.
New starter army. But again, I think it'll be a mechanized company. It'll be a load of BMPs and some infantry and a load of maybe M113s. I don't know whether this, because of the other thing, the World of Tanks stuff and the Clash of Steel, whether we're gonna see books around these for the 60s and the 70s.
Again, Checkpoint Charlie, I think at some point they'll get around to that, but probably not at the moment. You don't think there'll be a Korea book, for example, if they've done all the models? I don't think so, but I've been wrong before, so don't listen to me. Yeah. All right then. It looks like it's a big year for Flames of War because it's been quiet. We had certainly for Flames of War players, because we had the big Berlin release, which surprisingly had a lot of new stuff with it, which people we weren't expecting. There's 4 or 5 new plastic tanks in that. Yeah, absolutely. Which I definitely didn't expect. But then it went quiet. There was some Team Yankee releases, no? Yeah. But there were to call France and Berlin British. Some people. Was it Berlin British and Berlin German, or was it just Berlin German last year? There was a Berlin British.
But whether that was over 2 years or not, I do not know. Surely that wasn't the 1 year.
No, that did come out, but I'm not sure whether it came out before the Berlin German. That one had the new vehicle in that was is it Challenger? The Challenger in plastic. Did it have Comet? And the Archer. And it had Comet in it. The Archer, yeah. But Comet did have quite a bit of new stuff in it as well. Yeah, it did. Yeah, I think it might come out before the Berlin German. Maybe it came out just after. But that was kind of since the summer. We've not really had any Flames of War. It's been some Team Yankee releases. Sorry, Bulge British. Yeah, Bulge British. Yes. Yeah, not Berlin British. Berlin. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then we've had a bit of a gap. So for Flames of War, this is looking quite exciting.
Yeah.
And a whole new theatre. And some new, hopefully some new stuff, like you say, for even Mid-War Desert.
Yeah.
Certainly Matilda 2's are very much part of the Desert campaign.
Yeah, interestingly, they quite often cast that as early war, which is why they don't currently have it. So any Matilda 2's in that period in mid-war are leftovers. They're ones that haven't been knocked out. They're primarily used in what Flames of War would consider early war.
Right.
Which is kind of, there's a community card for them.
It's where these lines are, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think their concept of early war is up to Barbarossa.
Yeah.
But I think the Desert War is late 40. The kind of iconic Desert War is late 41 through to mid to late 42.
Yeah.
So it's in that mid-war, but it starts a bit earlier. But whether we'll see a lot of new Italian stuff, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have tanks in 40, I don't think.
So I think that's all I've got slides for at the moment.
Yeah, exciting times. I painted nothing because I was chatting, which I had expected to do. Harry wasn't even trying. John, what did you get up to? Let's have a look.
I realised how much of an idiot I am. So the phone's going to cut out now, but if I jankily put this up, I've done the tyres on these trucks. I really should have left the wheels off. You know, it would have made it so much easier.
Right.
But I didn't.
Okay, cool.
Oh, well. Pleasure to hear you once again, Harry. That's for sure.
Yeah, good to see you too, John.
Remind the beautiful people at home where they can find you, Harry, on the internet if they want product reviews and so forth.
On the intertubes, if you care about Flames of War, Team Yankee, even NAM and Fate of a Nation, you can find me on the YouTubes. Not really on the OnlyFans. So yeah, no, it's just the YouTubes where I do product reviews and talk about all sorts of other random things to do with those game systems and Battlefront and 15mm plastic. That's very much me.
Awesome.
Roger that. So for us and Flames of War, you haven't seen. Well, one of the things for us is I needed to take a bit of a break over Christmas. I'm sorry that you didn't see I think I mentioned around Christmas time there was a period of illness both before and after Christmas for us in the family. Yep. All of us got it one after the other. Then a couple of weeks later again, another sequence. But I was already planning on taking a bit of time off. We're getting back into the run of things. You've seen some videos coming out. We have pretty much finished the desert board. We haven't yet finished the video for the desert board and how to make it. So John and I have been talking about going back to where we started our Flames of War journey. All those years ago, we started with some desert vehicles, and they've not been on the table for a long, long old time. Yeah. So sometime now, you're probably talking about more 4 to 6 weeks than 1 week. But that's something we want to look at again. Because when we get the models out, we might realize we were playing much smaller scale games then. We might need to paint some more tanks.
I need to fill some things in.
Some more tanks and remember how we painted the previous lot.
That's always hard, isn't it?
We certainly need some less expensive German tanks. You know, really lean into the Panzer IIIs and whatnot.
Yeah. And I think what we played, I think the last couple of games we played, John was playing with like the up-armored, up-gun Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs. And I was playing with Valentines and Crusaders, and it had just a swarm of British stuff on.
Yeah, absolutely.
We just didn't have the shots for, and neither of us planned for that. But it's just that's
how it rolled out.
German tanks are expensive for just that little bit. So you'll see a little bit of that. We're going to hopefully do a couple product reviews tomorrow, and obviously I'm getting pretty excited about what's been coming out of. Warlord recently in their little snippets about Achtung Panzer. I think this is something probably, I don't know this with any certainty, but when we interviewed Stallard at Warlord Day, he said they were working on a new game.
Yes.
Which was not bolt action, but it was 28mm World War II, and it was more tank focused. most of us have got a lot more vehicles than we ever get to use in that game because we collect them. So that'll be an interesting thing to look at. I'm hoping we can do something with Warlord, but even if we can't, we'll be looking at that. Obviously.
I've seen the snippets of that, but again, I mean, 28mm is not my scale, so I don't have any.
No, but they've just been like adverts for It's
It
Coming.
looks like fun. Yeah, no, it's been all over my Facebook.
Akpog Panzer, like Guderian's book, which I have read, which means I must understand the game and do really well at it, right? All right, guys, that was us. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you for inviting me along, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.